As we clearly see in this video recording, that is a woman plummeting into the sea from a height of several meters. Her body is discovered about 45 minutes later. Initially, it was assumed that her death was the result of carelessness. However, investigators quickly suspected something more sinister at play. They uncovered a carefully orchestrated plan behind her death, one that almost deceived the police. The case took unexpected turns, with a highly intelligent perpetrator executing the plot flawlessly, until a small mistake exposed the truth. What really happened that day? How did the investigation unfold to reveal the hidden secrets behind this so-called accident? Stay tuned, as all will be revealed shortly. It was a clear, tranquil day on May 5th. A passenger ship was making its way from Dan City in Liaoning Province to Yantai City in Shandong Province. The calm sea stretched endlessly, dotted with occasional seagulls gliding gracefully through the sky. Passengers gathered on the deck, some chatting cheerfully, others absorbed in the serene view. The hum of the ship and the gentle waves created a soothing backdrop to the journey. Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the calm. Heads turned in alarm as people rushed toward the sound. At the railing stood a man, Li Yong, his face pale, his hands clutching the metal bar as if his life depended on it. He was trembling, his voice shaky as he managed to stammer out the horrifying news. His wife, Lu Wan, had fallen into the sea. According to him, she had been leaning over, captivated by the seagulls, when she lost her balance and plunged into the water below. The scene quickly became chaotic. Some passengers tried to console Yong, who seemed paralyzed with shock, while others began calling out for help. The ship's crew acted swiftly, contacting the authorities and initiating a search for Lu Wan. Yong, meanwhile, appeared overcome with guilt and grief. His voice broke as he lamented not being able to save her. "I couldn't jump in after her," he said, his body shaking as tears streamed down his face. His anguish was palpable, and those around him offered reassurances, urging him to stay calm. When the police arrived, Yong recounted their journey. He explained that he and his wife had recently visited his hometown in Liaoning to handle some residency paperwork. They were on this ship, traveling to Shandong, to continue their life together. As he spoke, Yong appeared inconsolable, frequently breaking down and muttering his regret at not being able to act faster to save Lu Wan. The police took his account seriously, but noted the unusual nature of the incident. Typically, recovering a body from the sea is a lengthy and challenging process. However, on this day, luck seemed to favor the investigators. The calm weather and clear conditions allowed the search team to locate Lu Wan's body within 45 minutes of the fall. As her body was brought on board, an unsettling silence fell over the ship. Yong collapsed to his knees at the sight, sobbing uncontrollably. But amidst the grief, something caught the attention of the police. Lu Wan's body bore visible signs of trauma, bruises on her face and neck that didn't quite fit the narrative of a simple fall. Questions began to form in the minds of the investigators. Was this truly an accident? Thus began the police investigation that would soon uncover a far darker truth. With the ship now moored, Yong's every word and action would come under scrutiny. What initially appeared to be a tragic accident at sea was about to unravel into something much more sinister. And so, the seeds of doubt were planted. What exactly happened on that ship? And what role did Yong play in his wife's untimely death? The recovery of Lu Wan's body in just 45 minutes after her fall was an unusual stroke of efficiency, given the unpredictable nature of sea rescues. Yet, as her body was brought aboard the ship and examined, it became evident that this was no ordinary tragedy. Police and forensic experts noticed bruising around her eyes, lips, and neck, marks inconsistent with simply falling into the sea. These signs hinted at a physical altercation, raising the first red flags about the circumstances of her death. Li Yong, meanwhile, continued to present himself as a grief-stricken husband. He remained by the railing, his body language alternating between apparent desolation and nervous energy. His words, however, began to attract scrutiny. He expressed urgent desires to conclude the formalities quickly so that Lu Wan could be cremated as soon as possible. Yong explained this by citing a local tradition in his hometown, claiming that the deceased must be cremated within 3 days to ensure their spiritual reincarnation. This urgency, instead of adding credibility to his grief, struck the investigators as strange. Why the rush, they wondered, when the circumstances of Lu Wan's death were still under investigation? Chinese law treats drowning cases as potential criminal incidents unless definitively proven otherwise. This meant a thorough investigation was mandatory before any death certificate could be issued, let alone a cremation. Yang's insistence felt out of place, almost desperate, and the investigators took note. Additionally, Yang's behavior on the ship was curiously inconsistent with his professed grief. While he displayed outward signs of mourning, breaking into tears when speaking of Lu Wan, his interactions with others aboard the ship were less convincing. Witnesses described him as detached and even irritated at times, especially when comforted by others. One passenger recalled Yang snapping at someone who tried to console him, saying, "Can you stop worrying? If you were in my situation?" This detached tone, coupled with his erratic behavior, raised further doubts among those observing him. As part of the investigation, Yang was questioned in detail about the events leading up to Lu Wan's fall. He described taking his wife to a quieter section of the deck, explaining that the area provided a better view of the sea. He claimed that, knowing his wife loved watching the ocean, he had chosen this spot to make the moment special. However, the location in question, a cramped area obstructed by lifeboats, was rarely visited by passengers. The railings in that part of the ship were also notably lower, making it riskier than other sections of the deck. When questioned about this choice, Yang's response seemed plausible on the surface but failed to alleviate the investigators' suspicions. Surveillance footage reviewed by the police added to the growing unease. The video showed Yang and Lu Wan standing together in the secluded area for about 20 minutes. Moments later, the footage captured Lu Wan falling backward into the sea. The way she fell immediately stood out. The forensic team explained that if she had simply lost her balance, her fall would have been more vertical. Instead, the footage suggested that she flipped backward in midair, an unusual motion that hinted at external force. Unfortunately, the video quality and camera angles didn't provide definitive evidence of what transpired in those critical moments. Still, other aspects of the footage painted a damning picture. Yang appeared to have carefully avoided the ship's numerous surveillance cameras while in the secluded area. He moved with an awareness that suggested he knew where the cameras were positioned, crouching or staying out of sight when necessary. This level of precision raised the question. Had Yang deliberately chosen this blind spot to orchestrate the incident? The combination of physical evidence from Lu Wan's body, inconsistencies in Yang's story, and his peculiar behavior made it clear that further investigation was needed. The police began delving into Yang and Lu Wan's relationship, hoping to uncover a motive if foul play was indeed involved. Was Yang truly a grieving husband, or was there something darker beneath his facade? The investigators were determined to find out. The ship's surveillance footage became the cornerstone of the investigation, offering critical glimpses into the events leading up to Lu Wan's tragic fall. With over 200 cameras installed throughout the vessel, investigators hoped the recordings would provide clear answers. What they uncovered, however, was a combination of ambiguity and chilling intent. The video confirmed that Li Yong and Lu Wan had spent time in a secluded section of the ship's deck just before the incident. This area, partially obstructed by lifeboats and rarely visited by other passengers, was an unusual choice for enjoying the view. It was cramped, isolated, and, most concerningly, had railings significantly lower than elsewhere on the ship. To investigators, the location itself raised questions. Why had Yang chosen this particular spot to spend time with his wife? In interviews, Yang claimed the choice was entirely innocent. He explained that Lu Wan was relatively short and that the low railings offered her a better vantage point for watching the sea and the seagulls. According to him, he simply wanted to make the moment special for his wife, knowing how much she enjoyed the ocean. Yet, this reasoning felt unconvincing when compared to the footage. The video captured the couple standing in this secluded area for about 20 minutes. Initially, their interaction appeared normal, with no overt signs of conflict. But investigators noted subtle body language that hinted at a lack of warmth between the two. Yang often stood apart, facing the sea, while Lu Wan lingered behind him. There was little indication of closeness, no gestures of affection one might expect between a married couple on what was supposed to be a peaceful journey. The pivotal moment came when Lu Wan fell into the sea. The footage, though not crystal clear, showed her body flipping backward in midair before hitting the water. This detail was critical. If Lu Wan had simply lost her balance, her fall would have been more direct, her body tilting forward or sideways. The backward motion was unnatural, suggesting that an external force might have been involved. Yet, the video left gaps in the story. The area where the incident occurred was a known blind spot in the ship's surveillance system. The cameras in that section provided only partial coverage, with angles that didn't capture the couple directly at all times. What the footage did show, however, was equally telling: Yong's behavior. From the moment he entered the secluded area, Yong appeared to move with an unusual awareness of his surroundings. He positioned himself carefully, avoiding direct exposure to the cameras. At times, he crouched or stood in angles that kept him out of view. This level of caution suggested premeditation, as if Yong knew exactly where the cameras were and how to avoid detection. The investigators reviewed the footage repeatedly, analyzing Yong's every move. They noted that his actions didn't align with those of a grieving husband who had just lost his wife to a tragic accident. Instead, his calculated movements hinted at a deliberate effort to conceal something. Adding to the growing suspicion was the fact that Yong himself had reported the incident to the authorities. While this might have initially painted him as a concerned spouse, investigators began to see it differently. By being the one to alert the police, Yong could control the narrative, portraying himself as a heartbroken husband rather than a potential suspect. Still, the footage alone wasn't enough to prove foul play conclusively. The low resolution and blind spots left critical moments unrecorded. But when paired with the physical evidence from Lu Wan's body, bruises and other signs of a struggle, the surveillance footage painted a picture that was difficult to ignore. This was no ordinary accident. The combination of Yong's calculated movements, the secluded location, and the unnatural nature of Lu Wan's fall led investigators to a chilling realization. There was a strong possibility that this incident had been carefully planned. The next step was to dig deeper into Yong's life and his relationship with Lu Wan. If this was premeditated, what could his motive have been? The answer lay in the secrets their relationship had been hiding all along. As investigators dug into the lives of Li Yong and Lu Wan, startling revelations began to surface, details that cast their seemingly ordinary marriage in a much darker light. What initially appeared to be a tragic accident was now unraveling into a tale of deception, manipulation, and greed. The first striking discovery was how little anyone knew about their relationship. Though legally married, Yong and Lu Wan had kept their union hidden from almost everyone, including close friends and family. Even Lu Wan's father was unaware that she had remarried. This secrecy raised immediate questions. Why would a husband and wife conceal their relationship so thoroughly? Further investigation into their marriage revealed a troubling dynamic. Yong, a university-educated businessman, had once been a respected figure. He owned a restaurant in Shanghai and carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to success. Lu Wan, in stark contrast, had led a humble life. She had worked as a waitress in Yong's restaurant, where the two first met. She was older than Yong, had 2 children from previous marriages, and lacked formal education. Despite her straightforward and honest nature, those who knew her were puzzled about why someone like Yong would marry her. It didn't take long for the police to uncover the truth. Yong had never loved Lu Wan. Their marriage, far from being a partnership based on mutual affection, was a calculated move on Yong's part. From the very beginning, it seemed, he had selected Lu Wan not as a life companion but as a pawn in a larger scheme. Shortly after their marriage, Yong had taken out several life insurance policies on Lu Wan. The total payout from these policies, in the event of her accidental death, amounted to over 12 million yuan, a staggering sum. Investigators noted that Yong was the sole beneficiary of these policies, and their timing was no coincidence. The policies had been purchased within just 2 months of their marriage. While Yong presented himself as a prosperous entrepreneur, the truth was far less flattering. He was drowning in debt, owing millions of yuan to creditors. In a desperate bid to maintain the facade of his former success, he had resorted to maxing out credit cards, even those taken out in Lu Wan's name. To investigators, the connection between Yang's financial troubles and the insurance policies was glaringly obvious. He stood to gain a fortune from Lu Wan's untimely death. But Yang's deceptions didn't end there. The investigation revealed that he had been leading a double life. While married to Lu Wan, Yang maintained a serious relationship with a 19-year-old university student. He had presented himself to the young woman as a single man, referring to Lu Wan as nothing more than a nanny employed in his home. The mistress, unaware of his true marital status, even considered marrying him. Yang's infidelity extended beyond this relationship. Police discovered that he had frequented nightclubs and sought out one-night stands with other women, often flaunting his wealth to attract their attention. Despite his financial struggles, he spared no expense to sustain this lifestyle, further compounding his debts. In contrast, Lu Wan's life had been one of quiet dedication. Friends described her as trusting and unassuming, qualities that likely made her an easy target for Yang's manipulations. She confided in close friends that she felt fortunate to have found such a caring and supportive husband. Tragically, she had no idea of the dark intentions lurking beneath Yang's seemingly perfect exterior. The evidence painted a grim picture. Yang had chosen Lu Wan as his victim long before they boarded that ship. He had assessed her vulnerabilities, her lack of family ties, her trusting nature, and exploited them to orchestrate a plan for financial gain. As the police pieced together these elements, the motive became chillingly clear. Lu Wan's death was not the result of a tragic accident. It was the culmination of a meticulously crafted scheme. With this revelation, investigators intensified their efforts to tie Yang directly to the crime. If this was indeed a murder motivated by greed, Yang's elaborate plan had one critical flaw: his belief that he could outsmart the police. The trial of Li Yong captured national attention as the intricate details of his crime were laid bare in the courtroom. What began as a tragic accident had evolved into a shocking tale of manipulation and greed, and now it was up to the court to deliver justice. From the outset, Yang's defense strategy was clear: deny premeditation and frame the incident as an unfortunate accident. His legal team argued that Yang's actions were the result of immense psychological stress brought on by financial troubles and the pressures of running a failing business. They claimed that any inconsistencies in his behavior were due to emotional distress rather than guilt. Yang himself maintained his innocence, asserting that Lu Wan's death was a tragic accident and that he had no reason to harm his wife. But the prosecution was prepared. They methodically dismantled Yang's claims, presenting a mountain of evidence that painted a starkly different picture. First, they focused on the insurance policies. Prosecutors argued that Yang's decision to purchase 4 substantial policies just 2 months after marrying Lu Wan was no coincidence. The timing, combined with his role as the sole beneficiary, pointed directly to a calculated plan. They emphasized that Yang's crushing debt provided a strong motive. His financial desperation had driven him to view his wife's life as a means to escape ruin. Then there was the surveillance footage. The prosecution played the video repeatedly for the court, drawing attention to the sequence of events leading up to Lu Wan's fall. The footage revealed that Yang had carefully chosen a secluded spot with poor camera coverage. They highlighted how Lu Wan's unnatural backward fall contradicted Yang's narrative of an accidental slip. These inconsistencies, combined with the visible bruises on her body, made it clear that her death was no accident. Yang's behavior immediately after the incident also came under scrutiny. The prosecution noted his impatience during the investigation and his repeated insistence on cremating Lu Wan's body as quickly as possible. This urgency, they argued, was an attempt to destroy evidence. Furthermore, witnesses testified about Yang's cold demeanor, describing him as detached and irritable when others tried to console him. Throughout the trial, Yang remained unflinching. He denied any intention to harm Lu Wan, maintaining that he loved her deeply. But his lack of remorse became a focal point for the prosecution. Witnesses recalled how he had shown no genuine grief, and his actions after the incident suggested a calculated effort to cover his tracks rather than mourning the loss of a loved one. The defense attempted to counter these points, citing Young's history of mental health struggles and financial pressures as mitigating factors. They argued that if he had indeed pushed Lu Wan, it was in the heat of the moment, without premeditation. Young himself claimed that they had argued just before the incident and that her fall was a tragic consequence of that argument, not a deliberate act. But the court was not convinced. The evidence of premeditation, the insurance policies, the surveillance footage, and the carefully orchestrated setup of the crime scene was overwhelming. Young's attempts to portray himself as a grief-stricken husband were contradicted by his own actions and the testimony of those who knew him. The court delivered its verdict. Young was found guilty of intentional murder and insurance fraud. He was sentenced to death. In the months that followed, Young filed an appeal, maintaining his innocence and insisting that the court had misunderstood the circumstances of Lu Wan's death. But in December, nearly 2 years after the incident, the Supreme Court upheld the original sentence. The judges ruled that the evidence against Young was irrefutable and that his actions were both deliberate and cruel. Even in the face of overwhelming evidence, Young continued to deny his guilt, showing no remorse for his actions. His statements during the final trial angered many, as he refused to take responsibility for the death of his wife. As the trial concluded, the public reaction was a mix of satisfaction and lingering debate. While most agreed with the court's decision, some questioned whether the evidence was enough to remove all doubt about Young's intentions. Regardless, the verdict brought some solace to Lu Wan's family, who expressed relief that justice had been served for their daughter. The trial's conclusion marked the end of a lengthy pursuit of justice, but the reverberations of Lu Wan's tragic death extended far beyond the courtroom. Across China, the case sparked heated debates, capturing public attention with its complex blend of calculated betrayal and cold-hearted ambition. On one side, many lauded the verdict as a triumph of justice. The evidence of Young's premeditation, from the insurance policies to the surveillance footage, was damning. For these individuals, the court's decision to uphold the death sentence was seen as a fitting punishment for a man who had not only ended a life but had done so for financial gain, betraying the trust of someone who believed in him. Public forums and social media were filled with messages of support for Lu Wan's family, with many expressing relief that the legal system had acted decisively in such a chilling case. However, the clarity of the evidence remained a topic of contention among some. Critics argued that while Young's behavior was undeniably suspicious, the surveillance footage alone didn't conclusively prove that he pushed Lu Wan into the sea. They questioned whether the case relied too heavily on circumstantial evidence and Young's apparent lack of remorse, leaving room for doubt. These debates underscored the broader challenge of interpreting complex cases where intent and action are not always captured with absolute certainty. For Lu Wan's family, however, there was no ambiguity. The evidence, combined with Young's actions before and after the incident, made it clear to them that her death was no accident. The pain of losing a loved one in such a violent and calculated manner was compounded by the betrayal they felt upon learning of Young's motives. Lu Wan's mother, in particular, struggled with guilt and heartbreak. She publicly lamented not knowing about her daughter's relationship with Young sooner, believing that she might have been able to prevent the tragedy had she been more involved. For a parent, the realization that their child was manipulated, betrayed, and ultimately killed by someone they trusted was almost too much to bear. Lu Wan's daughters were also deeply affected. Having experienced the hope of seeing their mother find happiness with a new partner, they were left grappling with the devastating reality that her life had been taken by the very person who was supposed to protect and support her. Their tears in the courtroom symbolized not only their grief, but also the crushing weight of their mother's unfulfilled dreams and undeserved fate. The tragedy also served as a sobering reflection on the vulnerability of individuals like Lu Wan. A modest woman with a humble background, she had been targeted by Young precisely because he believed she was easy to manipulate. Her trust and kindness, qualities that should have been met with care and respect, were instead exploited for personal gain. This aspect of the case struck a chord with many, highlighting the darker side of human nature and the potential for exploitation in unequal relationships. Psychologists and social commentators weighed in, describing Young as the embodiment of greed and cruelty. His belief that he could orchestrate a perfect crime and outsmart both the legal system and his victim revealed a chilling confidence in his own intelligence and a lack of empathy. It was a grim reminder of how far some individuals might go when driven by desperation and a disregard for others. In the end, while the verdict provided a measure of closure, it could never erase the pain of Lu Wan's loss. Her family found solace in the fact that Yong had been held accountable, but the emotional scars of the betrayal and tragedy would remain with them forever. As the story faded from the headlines, it left behind an indelible mark on those who followed it. It was a stark reminder of the importance of vigilance in relationships, the devastating consequences of unchecked greed, and the enduring resilience of those seeking justice for their loved ones. Lu Wan's story, though tragic, served as a call for compassion and awareness in a world where trust is too often betrayed. It was a painful lesson in the fragility of life and the courage required to stand against injustice, even in the face of unspeakable loss. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications as we bring you new stories daily. See you in the next video. Thanks for watching.